tell if this is the first step in creating a political formation to rival the ruling party. Nicolaas Bauer, Johannesburg.
Well, we're joined now by political analyst Daniel Silke. Daniel, good afternoon to you. Is Numsa really going to leave COSATU?
Well, I think if they're going to leave COSATU, they've got to be sure, they've got to know where they're going. And I think there are very few options for Numsa at this stage. There's a few months to go before an election. Should they decide to leave COSATU right now, they will be faced with having to try to mobilize to find some sort of political home for their followers. They're going to have to tell their followers perhaps where they should be looking at in the election campaign. Time is short. They haven't got the logistics, the nationwide electoral footprint that they would have had they done this a while ago. And I think it's extremely difficult. The timing is not good for them to leave right now, but clearly I think they are preparing us in South Africa for what I think is some sort of larger realignment within the ANC, largely around not only personality, but around economic policy and economic visions for the future of the country.
So Numsa could stand alone as a political party. They certainly have the weight.
I'm not sure if Numsa could stand alone. They would have to align themselves with other forces. You must remember that Numsa themselves are a trade union that has been under substantial pressure over the last years since Marikana. They have lost membership. They've tried to regain that membership, but they've lost membership. They're in an internal intra-trade union battle with AMCU over who can be more radical, who can elicit more from the mining houses. So within Numsa's broad world view, they themselves are locked into some sort of internal political strife. And I think going it alone, forming a party centered around Numsa, is not really going to serve them. They are going to have to use somebody of great stature, potentially Zwelinzima Vavi, to project a much broader, wider, workerist image for South Africa, the creation of some sort of Labour Party in South Africa. And this goes well beyond the narrow confines of Numsa.
If Numsa did indeed decide to leave COSATU, where would that leave the country's big trade federation?
Well, it would leave it deeply divided and deeply scarred, and I think it would create clear problems for the ANC. It wouldn't be a cohesive trade union as it once was. Depending on the success of some sort of breakaway movement, this could lead to a domino effect with other unions coming out in support of some sort of new political entity or formation. And I think it has serious consequences. It is a long time in coming, this particular disagreement. And it has been exacerbated, not just by the politics of personality, but it's also been exacerbated by the ANC's inertia in policy making. And, of course, a confluence of events around the support of the National Development Plan. Supporting it yes or supporting it no. And I think that it's going to be extremely tough for a Labour movement to go it alone unless it has significant leadership, unless it has a revitalized leadership that needs to come out from existing structures and be prepared to support it. The union needs to put its money where its mouth is, in a sense, and perhaps we are seeing the first signs of this, but it's going to be a long road until it becomes a significant alternative player in South African politics.
Numsa, though, echoing this call that seems to be getting louder suddenly, that Jacob Zuma needs to go.
Well, certainly, I think as part and parcel of their rejection of the ANC, they are latching on to the persona of Jacob Zuma and the current dissatisfaction around Jacob Zuma to perhaps increase support for their cause. It's not just there for a narrow workerist range of issues, that's clearly part of it, but it extends beyond that to question really the persona of Jacob Zuma as well, and it gives added ammunition to the leaders of Numsa to potentially motivate for some sort of split or breakaway.
Jacob Zuma suddenly could become a bit of a liability for the ANC ahead of this next election.
I think in part Jacob Zuma is a liability, and perhaps certainly in Gauteng and amongst elements within the Labour movement, he's a liability. But you must remember last week, in the midst of the mourning for Nelson Mandela, the ANC continued to win by-elections. In fact, the ANC were very successful in maintaining a very solid vote in the Tlokwe by-elections last week. So for many ANC supporters, Zuma might not be necessarily their first choice, but brand ANC remains perhaps much bigger than brand Zuma. But in Gauteng, of course, this might be a different story altogether. And I think ANC supporters increasingly are in a dilemma, really. Do they vote for the ANC, notwithstanding Jacob Zuma, or do they withhold their vote for another political party, or what's more likely, perhaps do they abstain from voting altogether, which will cause the ANC percentages also to drop in the election next year.
Daniel Silke, thank you very much indeed for coming in this afternoon. Well, stay with politics. The new collective of 5 opposition